Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning. I'm Father Jay Friedel. Welcome to Faith in Our Hometown for another week. We hope you're coming back again, or maybe just joining us for the first time, but welcome. This morning, my guest is going to be Aaron Brown, who's the lead pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. And Aaron has been involved, as many of the people in the community here, with the Bright Futures program that's been going with our Joplin Public Schools for a long time. And so we're going to be talking about Bright Futures a little bit this morning, and we're going to be talking about whether or not, some of us are more excited about it than others. Some folks are worried. Some folks think there are some dangerous moments or some entanglement issues. Other folks are saying, well, what's the problem? Let's just go full speed ahead. So that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit here on Faith in Our Hometown. Hopefully we might have some disagreements, but I'm sure that we're going to be able to do so civilly and socially and still come with the best that we can for that program. So we will be right back after this Mercy Minute.
Hi, I'm Angie Sabrita with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Danny Liu. He's a bariatric surgeon with Mercy, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell me, what does that mean?
Bariatric surgery is also known as weight loss surgery. And at our bariatric surgery center, we focus on taking a multidisciplinary approach to fighting obesity. And that includes behavioral modification, lifestyle changes, and dietary counseling. And combined with surgical intervention, this usually leads to a very long-term and durable, successful weight loss. At our center, we also offer a full complement of surgical options, including laparoscopic room-wide gastric bypass, sleeve gastrectomy, and the lap band. And we tailor the individual needs.
So it's not just something that people just dive into. You actually work with them over the long course.
Yes, that's correct. It is our aim to provide a safe, proven, and effective option for those patients that have morbid obesity who have struggled for too long on their own.
Very good. If you want to find out more, visit mercy.net.
Good morning. I'm Father Jay Friedel. Welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning is Aaron Brown, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Bright Futures and how that's kind of taken off in the Joplin area and, some of the issues surrounding it. Mm-hmm. So Aaron, you've been involved since the very beginning. Why don't you just tell us about your involvement with Bright Futures, why you're excited about it, what you think is great about the program?
Yeah, my disclaimer is I really haven't been involved from the very beginning, but our church has been involved I think since right before the tornado, so which is not too far from when they exactly. began. So, I think the thing that excites me most, or why we're involved at St. Paul's, is just because of the practical side of helping kids. That all the facts and figures that talk about if a kid can graduate from high school, that is a huge indicator of future success. And the opposite's true, that if kids don't graduate from high school, that are much more prone to be involved in violent crime, to have drug issues, it's a litany of things that if kids can make that milestone of graduation, that life changes for them. Many doors open up. So sure. For us as a congregation, it's been about, okay, what can we do? We're neighbors right there. We share a back door with Cecil Floyd Elementary School. So for us, it was, all right, we have a bunch of people that are, just ordinary folks, but with some extraordinary passion to help and change the culture. And so what can we do with them? Sure. And a lot of that just becomes us working our way in as we've been invited to be tutors. And the key pieces of the program, as we understand it, are the food backpacks that kids right. get, that kids that are, that may not have enough nutrition over the weekend, that they get a backpack that they take home with them that provides some nutrition over right. the weekend. There's a lunch buddy program, so that really it's just being a positive influence in a kid's life, an at-risk kid. So to go once a week and have lunch with a kid and just interact with them, which is something that can be a little awkward for people, but at the same time, it can be one of those things that puts your thumb on the scale of a kid's life, because they just can maybe see an alternative way to live. And then there's the tutoring program, and that allows people to go in and read to kids after school, help them with their homework. It's an hour a week that can happen. So we're just like, gosh, if we can have a way for our people to go in and help a kid succeed in life and help their future unfold for an hour a week or 20 minutes a week to be a lunch buddy, that's what that takes. Let's do it.
Sure.
Let's do what we can.
And I think we'd agree very much that we want all of our kids in our community to step forward in life, to succeed in school. I've worked in higher ed now for 20 plus years, and we want to see the same thing. I want to see them graduate all through college because that's their future. I mean, that's what they're going to be able to do. And so we've got a long tradition of pushing education in the Catholic Church. That's how the Catholics in this country became a big chunk of the solid middle class, was because we pushed education from the very beginning. Many of our immigrant families and those kinds of things coming along, we did it with the Irish and the Italians and the Germans and all those folks, and that was how we got everybody in and kind of helped bring them along in a way that they could succeed in this country in ways that that perhaps their grandparents would have never dreamed of. So helping the kids succeed, I think, is a common goal that we want to do.
Who's against that, right?
Exactly. And we always we try to make sure our schools are strong, and I'm happy to say I'm very pleased when I hear the stories that are coming out of our public school system here, because so many of them are very strong. We're blessed with not just one strong school district, but several, that surround us. And I think that those are all terrific things. We of course run our own Catholic school system. We're very proud of that too. What's interesting there is that, and we'll talk about this again, I think probably in the next segment, but we started our Catholic schools because we didn't always like the way we were being treated in the public schools at that point in time, in the early 1800s. So we'll get into that. But so you mentioned some concrete things and some of the positive things that are going on. And again, I don't think anybody would have any argument with feeding kids that are hungry. Okay, we've talked about that on some of our previous shows with other guests about feeding the hungry and our roles in doing that as a church. Again, we probably wouldn't have any disagreement there. And certainly in terms of tutoring, in terms of just helping kids out and going in and reading and doing those things. What's interesting to me, and where Bright Futures sometimes is a little bit on the edge, is that when faith communities are the ones that go in and do it, when they go in as faith communities, are they doing so in a way that would trip off anybody's alarms about a faith community doing it? So in other words, I knew when Memorial was across the street from us and we were involved with the program a little bit, I kept saying to the administrators, if a kid needs something, you let me know, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out how to get you that for that kid. We'll figure some of that stuff out. But I was a little bit less comfortable going in like this into the just into a lunchroom to to visit. I wouldn't mind going and visit my own kids necessarily if I had that kind of an invitation, but my just going in and saying I'm going to come now and and read stories to a kid or help a kid with reading or something like that. I would wonder whether or not parents or something would think, am I going to try to push my Catholic beliefs or my Catholic values on those kids? And we even had one issue with the Bright Futures situation where, one of the church communities was helping with, some back to school stuff and, team building activities for the kids, and there was even some challenge to some of that, even some questions legally as to whether or not there was some proselytizing going on. And so that's one of the reasons why I've always said to somebody, well, if you got a kid that needs something, I can come in and do that, but I'm a little less comfortable going in and doing it at the other level. Now, part of that's because I got my own schools, okay, and I know that. But by the very same token, and I certainly, sometimes I get the complaint that I'm not spending enough time in my own school, much less, than trying to figure out how much time I'm going to spend in the public schools. So, I don't want to, die on that cross either. But with that in mind, have you ever felt uncomfortable about whether or not anybody was pushing that line or and I don't want to, I think inappropriate's almost in some ways the wrong word to use, But do you see any issues for yourself in terms of entanglement with the way that the program is unfolded for you?
Well, I have not,
Okay.
And partly it's because I can go incognito. I mean,
Sure.
you got a uniform. I can go in and do that in a way that incognito is not the right word either. But you know, and what we tell our folks that are volunteering there, and I think the Bright Futures training tells them this too. The faith-based partners is, you know, please don't proselytize. And so our understanding is that we're not going to go there to proselytize or to teach our faith,
Right.
But we are going there to do those basic things that they need done. And we're not, you know, I guess it goes back to, you know, Jesus said, feed my sheep. You know, he in talking to Peter, and that I think that command goes to beyond that, to feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And he didn't say feed my sheep when they agree with me, feed my sheep when they do what you want them to do or
Right.
believe like you believe. He just said feed my sheep, and so I think that's part of it, literally, to feed the hungry, and then to work within that system of Bright Futures and be simply tutors and to be simply lunch buddies. Now, we're also open to the possibility that if somebody makes an invitation to say, hey, you know, one of the kids says, hey, I want you to meet my parents. You know, all right, well, we'll go meet your parents. That's a different invitation and a different time and place. You know, if that invitation comes and then somebody can talk about, well, why I do this is because I'm a part of a church that gave me the avenue to come do this, and it's a part of my faith to help. And you know, again, if that should happen, and it has, I know that it has with folks in our church, that it's not about proselytizing. It's still about, well, we're here to help. You know, it's part of who we are in our nature, to help.
Well, and again, it's one of those situations where I would bet that works the right way most of the time, you know? And, you know, maybe I shouldn't be as leery, but I guess our history tells us why there's a little bit of reservation. You know, working in higher ed, you know, I know that, you know, college students are expected to be adults, make their own decisions, do those things. Whereas sometimes with little kids, it's one of the reasons why, you know, we don't deal with issues of religion and things like that, especially at the grade school level. We deal with sometimes issues of, you know, world traditions or those kinds of things at the high school level. At the college level, all the, you know, gloves are off and you can talk about it, you know, pretty much everything you want. But I mean, I wouldn't want the case of a little kid, you know, being in a school classroom and say, well, why are we Catholic? But my teacher says, you know, she goes to the Methodist church and, you know, she's smart and she knows everything. You know, of course, gotta work. Of course, why I work through all that. And again, we just wouldn't want our little kids, especially the ones who are the most vulnerable, you know, to come into that kind of a thing. We do with teachers. And of course, teachers got plenty of education. Teachers know how to navigate those waters. And, you know, no teacher in our public schools would navigate it for very long if they started to violate those things. And I'm guessing probably there's the same kind of consideration with Bright Futures and all the volunteers. And I would bet that most of the time that we're in the right ballpark and nobody's doing anything they shouldn't do. I'll tell you a little bit after the break about how we started Catholic schools and why, and you'll show why I have a little bit of a you know, kind of a more reserved attitude toward the whole thing. But this is Faith in Our Hometown.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Welcome back. Aaron Brown is our guest today here on Faith in Our Hometown, and he is the lead pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. This morning we're talking about Bright Futures and whether or not there's any, you know, worries of entanglement. You know, recently, you know, the public school system has, you know, kind of made sure that there's a little bit of formal distance,
Right.
between the Bright Futures organization and the public school system, not wanting to be seen as completely, the same thing or the same entity. I'll just tell you how Catholic schools got started, because back in the early 1800s, there was a lot of pressure on Catholics to be American and not Catholic, like you couldn't be both at the same time. In case anybody's not figured it out, we really can. But at least that's our version. But there was a lot of pressure on folks. And actually, the public schools were not like a religion-free zone. Depending on what area of the country you were in, and you had the bulk of a community be one way, that was kind of the way the school rolled. And there weren't all kinds of regulations, or any kind of understanding that our grade schools and our public schools were supposed to be religion-free zones, where everyone was free to attend regardless of their religious faith and the way that they practice. And so our kids were actually getting proselytized, especially in the Northeast. And so what happened is that in the early 1800s, say the 1840s probably, or 1850, Catholics just decided we were going to pull our kids out of the public school because we didn't like the way they were being treated. We didn't like them trying to strip away their faith, as we saw it, so that they could be something different. We thought we could be Catholic and American all at the same time. And so that's how we got into this whole Catholic school system.
Right. Well, and I think at that time, too, there was a lot of suspicion of Roman Catholicism.
I think in Joplin there might still be, but,
but there was some active undermining of the Roman Catholic faith because people just didn't understand the idea of the papacy and what that meant when someone from a foreign country was telling people here what to... a lot of it was just the stuff that ripples through the United States in other ways. Just fear.
Exactly.
Just fear, not just in the United States, but everywhere.
Well, and we just responded. I mean, and it was in a way that in some ways, I think has been good for us. Okay, I can tell you we spent a fortune through the last 150, 60 years educating our kids because it's not a cheap prospect. And of course, I also want to mention, College Heights also has a religious-based school, so they're probably the only other ones in town, and the Lutheran schools. Okay, so they of course have similar things like we do. They run a grade school where kids can be exposed to it. They can have religion class. They can have religious instruction. We can talk about Jesus all we want in that context because there are schools. Now, we still follow all of the standards for education and do the same testing and all those things as in the public schools. Certainly, we don't have the same dollars. We can't be everything to everybody like the public schools have a public mandate to do. But we're proud of and I'm sure the Lutheran schools are proud of their kids and their schools, and College Heights is proud of theirs. But in they're distinctively religious in their approach and in the way that we will share with our kids our faith. And that's one of the reasons why we do it. It's one of the reasons why we go out on that limb to do that. And of course, anybody else is welcome to send their kids to our schools too. But even if they're not Catholic, they're still going to be receiving, Catholic religion class along with everybody else, just simply because that's what we do and that's the way that we run it. Now, we're sensitive when we have folks in our midst, not to say, you're wrong or you're stupid or for not doing it our way or whatever. I think we're very sensitive about those things. But at the very same token, we never apologize for teaching our catechism, for sharing faith with our kids within that context. And so it's a very different thing. I mean, we love it. And I will tell you, I mean, point blank, I've got just as many kids from St. Peter's and St. Mary's and all of our Catholics. We got just as many kids, and probably more, in the public school system than we do in the Catholic school system. But we're not trying to compete with the public school system. We're just trying to do faith-based education as best we know how. And I think with very high standards. I think our product we turn out is really good.
That's great.
But we're happy that we also get to do the faith-based organization within the middle of that. But that's how we got started, was because we were afraid our kids were being proselytized, and there was an attempt to kind of pick them off, and that would just
which is why you brought up the whole idea of entanglement,
right?
And I think because of that history, you're probably more sensitive than I would be, or non-Catholics would be.
Sure.
But our whole concept is to not go in to try and force our beliefs, but to simply go in and be servants.
Yeah.
And I think but at the same time, I realize that if there were somebody who had an agenda of any sort, whether that would be a Satanist or somebody who had staunch atheistic beliefs or whatever, I wouldn't want to exclude them per se if they were just willing to help. But
anybody of
just
goodwill.
just like I would be suspicious of their agenda, I am sure that they would be suspicious of mine, even though I'm sitting here on TV saying, no, we don't have an agenda, we're not trying to convert anybody, but at the same time, you can't go into any situation without taking your faith with you.
That's what got me at the very beginning when we were starting to do Bright Futures. And again, I'm not trying to pick at Bright Futures because I really do. I think it's great that we have caring people from the community who are trying to help make sure that they're shoring up whatever support any of our kids need in whatever way, shape, or form in our schools. So I'm not trying to pick at Bright Futures, okay? But I'm saying that I always tried to remain, kind of a respectful distance and to make sure that we don't do anything because I don't want there to be any entanglement. I also don't want there to be any entanglement for any of the folks that are volunteering.
Well, isn't what we're talking about here this the same issue about prayer in school?
Sure.
Isn't this the same thing? So, it's not a Bright Futures thing. It's what happens when someone says, well, yeah, I'm going to lead my class in prayer, whether that's a teacher or a kid, Well, obviously not everybody's on the same page in what they believe about spiritual things. So how are they supposed to navigate that? And again, I wouldn't necessarily want somebody leading my kids' class. My kids go to public school. I wouldn't want my kid to be led in prayer by someone I wasn't quite sure where they were coming from.
Right.
So I'd rather kind of take that responsibility as a parent and do that at home and through our church family than have that happen there when I don't know exactly what the agenda is.
That's exactly the point. And people have said, well, but we got to have God in our schools. And I'm just like, well, if you want God in your schools, then you should run a school like we run. God's there all the time.
God's already
at the beginning of every class. He's, we got pictures of him on the wall.
As long as there are tests in school, there will be prayer in school, right?
Exactly. And God knows that's the truth. Even if, we're not supposed to say it out loud.
Oh. One of the things I look at Joplin, and I've been here 21 years, and one of the things I think is its strength is that there aren't a lot there isn't much animosity at all between the business community and the educational community, the faith community, local government. We always have our little tiffs, right?
Yeah.
And so I think one of the strengths of Joplin, one of the strengths, particularly after the tornado, was that these four big entities had already made decisions. We're going to work together. We're going to listen to one another. We're going to talk to one another. And even an issue like this, you talk about entanglement or prayer in school, we're still ready to say, okay, let's talk about it.
Let's figure out how to do it.
Figure out how to do it. Even shows like this that you've started, I think, that's why you're doing this,
That's
right?
exactly why we're trying to do this.
Let's be able to talk about it rather than just draw a bunch of lines and say, you're there, I'm here.
Or you're bad because your approach is different than mine. Yeah, that's what we really are trying to do here.
See, I wore black and white today just to
really,
make sure that
with a little touch of blue.
Just to let you know I'm with you, man.
I wore some of those coats, but they yelled at me because my patterns on some of my coats were dancing on the television screen, so I'm in solid black now. But nonetheless, there's so many ways that we can work together. There's so many ways that we can do those things. Back to the issue of the prayer. Like I say, I always try to teach my kids to be sensitive when some of those things come up. Even if they were going to take turns saying prayers, or even with my college students, and it's just like if we're in an ecumenical gathering or whatever, I'm going to say to them if they're invited to pray, I said, now don't start with a prayer that people are gonna have trouble connecting with, okay? Or if we're praying in an interfaith setting, and we're praying with Muslim students and Jewish students, why don't we just pray in the name of God? Because we can all agree that there is one, All right, so why don't we do that? One of my famous ways of doing that at Southeast Missouri State when I was over there for many years, oh God beyond all names. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know who I'm praying to. All right, and nobody's going to tell me not to pray to my God. I'm going to know, and He's even got a name, okay? And I'm going to know who I'm praying to when I do that. Yeah. But within that context, I don't necessarily think that I have to, nor do I think I'm even selling out my faith. And I know we could argue or disagree on this, and different people have different approaches. But I don't think that in that context, when we're trying to be unifying, that I'm even selling out my faith by doing that. Okay? Now, I got my own Christian beliefs. I got my own Catholic beliefs within Christianity. No problem. But when I say to my kids, well, if you're going to lead the prayer, don't start with Hail Mary. Yeah. Because that's going to alienate a bunch of the other kids who find that challenging or that difficult to ask somebody else to pray for us. The
football players will get it.
The football players always get it. And I find it fun that actually made it into the lexicon of sports language in the United States, even though most people don't even know what I'm talking about. But what the heck? It's all good. But I just say to mine, can we be sensitive to one another? And if we're sensitive to one another, does that mean that we're selling out? And I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'm right with you on that.
So we just try to do some of those things and try to keep working together. I agree with you. It's one of the strengths of the Joplin community is that we can talk to each other, that we do try to figure out how to come together and to talk. And it is the purpose of shows like this that we can come together and to do that in ways that even when we disagree about approaches. So I mean, see, people are free to disagree with me about my caution around Bright Futures. All right, but I just want to make sure that when we're doing that, we're doing it with respect, that we can respect each other, that I respect the right for you to pray and to worship the way you want to, and that I've got the same right to be able to do that, and for us to come together and to support our schools. Again, my real question was, why did it have to be church rather than the religions that did it? But that's a different story. Aaron, it's been a great conversation. Yep. I will be right back after this Mercy Minute.
I'm Angie Separita with Mercy Hospital Joplin, and I'm here today with Dr. Samir Dalia. Dr. Dalia, your specialty is in hematology and oncology, is that right?
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what your specialty is, and what your patients can find when they come and see you?
Yeah, so at the Mercy Cancer Center, we deal with the surgical outcomes with cancer patients. We have radiation oncologists who also help with the radiation therapy of cancer patients, and then myself as a medical oncologist helps with the medical therapy, including chemotherapy and other therapies for cancer patients.
Very good. And you're located inside the new Mercy Joplin, right?
Yeah, we're located inside the new Mercy Joplin. We have our own cancer center entrance, and we have a beautiful infusion center and radiation suite.
And so if patients need to be seen, do they need a referral?
They don't need a referral.
They don't. So simple as that. They just need to call. So if you want to find out more information, you can call the number on your screen or visit mercy.net.
Welcome back to our close here for this week's Faith in Our Hometown. I've been speaking with Aaron Brown, who is the lead pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist.
The other saint, you just got to remember.
The other saint, Peter and Paul. I'm at Peter, you've got Paul. There we go. But at any rate, as we've been talking about Bright Futures, we can certainly agree on the fact that we want to support all of our kids in our community, no matter what school they go to. We don't want any kid to be in need and not support them. We don't want any kid to have some extra, even educational support that they can have that would not be there if we couldn't help. We kind of come down in different places in terms of, what's the best way to do that? Should we do it through churches? Should we do it through regular? We both agree, though, that grade school is no place for proselytism. And we're not saying, don't hear us wrong, that's what we were saying that Bright Futures is all about, because Bright Futures really tries very hard not to do that. But I think it's still, from my vantage point, it involves a little bit of caution. And as long as nobody's overstepping their bounds and taking the rights away from parents to do some of those things, we're in good shape. We'll hope you'll join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Thanks for joining us this morning. God bless.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on KSN. Brought to you as a community service by Mercy Hospital Joplin.